Sam Gituku, the hashtag to use is Citizen Daybreak. Now, in just about 2.5 years, we'll have an election in this country. Is it 9th or 10th of August 2027? We'll check. It is the second Tuesday of August 2027. And there's something that Wakili Ogola mentioned, that 2.5 years to the 2022 election, there was an election operations plan. I don't know where we are with that. So many gaps that we face, Canon Kinyanjui. Obviously, the selection panel is expected to release a long list of the applications after cleaning up, comparing the online applications and the physical applications. What is it that you think we need to do to get it right this time, even before we can get to the question of timelines that are really running fast?
Well, I think the first thing is that we have settled a lot of the disputes that attended the creation and establishment of the panel, because the credibility of the panel is going to also influence the credibility of the names that they are going to give out. And we give it to the politicians, they have agreed, and now we are going on, although I think there are a few cases still pending. Number two is, and this is what we have asked the panel, to make sure that they bring people who have character, who are known to have independent mind, who are known to love Kenya and be patriotic, and who are not tainted by the politics of either side of the political divide. I think once we get the right people on board, for us within the religious sector, we always work closely with the IEBC commissioners and the staff to make sure that they deliver a good election. They will have to work to make sure that the trust levels are very high. Right now, we have very many vacancies in by-elections. So the first test will be how are they going to carry out those by-elections once they are in office. Are they going to be fair? Are they going to be done properly? Are they going to be seen to have followed the law to the letter? The second thing is they still have the work ahead of them with regard to delimitation of wards and constituencies. Right. That is a very sensitive work. We are already time-barred in terms of constitutional timelines. And I know that the previous commission of Chebukati did a bit of groundwork, and they will need to do that quickly. Now, the challenge is we can't do delimitation 1 year to the election. It's politically sensitive, it divides communities, and it's going to cast a bad spell on the next election. So how they must do it is they have to do it quickly. Yeah. But assuming that we are going to have them sworn in maybe by June, you can see that they have their plate full. But more importantly, that I think Kenyans needs to be even more focused on is the registration for IDs. We still have a challenge. We have a lot of challenge of young people who are still seeking these documents. Some are waiting for quite a long time. And this is something that we have been asking government to make sure that especially the younger people who have lost their IDs, are getting their IDs replaced in readiness for the opening of the register. After the last election, obviously, there needs to be a massive registration of voters so that those who might have died are also weeded out of the voters register. And then finally, and which is even much more important, is the attempt that we are seeing right now from certain quarters to remove the entire Supreme Court from office. Supreme Court is also have the same weight as the IEBC when it comes to election matters, because we know they are the ones who can hear the petition, especially presidential petition. So the attempt 2.5 years to the election to subject the Supreme Court judges to that process, we are not necessarily defending them, but as a religious community, we feel that it's a sinister plan to actually make sure that either we are not going to have a Supreme Court when we need one, when elections are held, or that the people who are going to be there are perhaps going to be aligned to one side of the political formation. Our ask from the politician is that leave the Supreme Court alone. Let us work to make sure that if it is one or two individuals that are removed, even if all of them were guilty as charged, let's remove part of them, not all of them at once, because we know it is also going to be a piece of work to put them back. We have been 2.5 years without an IEBC. We could be another 3 years before we get a Supreme Court. So I think they are flying too close to the sun, like Icarus, as politicians. Yeah. And I think that ambition should be abandoned for the sake of national security and also for the sake of a peaceful election in 2027.
But interesting. You raise very interesting issues, and many of them. Chairman, what would you raise?
I'm just worried about his comment where he says politicians should actually keep out of Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I don't know how politicians have come into that, because we are seeing some petitioners who are not politicians. In fact, they are seasoned advocates of the High Court of Kenya. And unless there is a nexus, really, I don't think there is any role being played by politicians. I believe these are individuals who are aggrieved by their own courses of action.
Yep.
And they have elected to go that route. So I want my comment is...
Would you want to clarify?
Yeah, I don't see how politicians come into this unless we speculate.
Thank you very much. I think we know how Kenya works. And even, for example, when Cherera 4 were removed, who moved Parliament? It was individuals.
Yeah,
so there's an interplay between politicians and Kenyans, which is natural and normal. And I think the weight of removing and seeking removal of Supreme Court has a lot of political ramifications and weight. And I'll be surprised, and we still...
You think it's politicians want the judges out?
Definitely, the outcome has a political outcome that is required. And I think...
to what end?
Well, we don't know. We can't speculate. But for us who are in the religious sector, we look at IEBC, we look at the judiciary, we look at all these institutions that safeguard the will of the people to be sacred. And if someone is seeking to interfere with them, there must be a consensus. There must be public participation, which we are seeing that now is coming up. But for us is the caution, to caution the country, and to speak to the conscience of society and say what is going to happen once the Supreme Court judges are removed, because they could all be removed.
Okay.
What are the consequences?
All right. Mheshimiwa Murugara, so on the question of boundaries delimitation, and I know there are many stumbling blocks that have been planted in the way.
Yep.
First, the census of 2019 has been questioned.
Yeah,
There has been a High Court order to government agencies to use the data of 2009. If you use the data of 2009, you end up with the boundaries as we know them today. What do you think is the right thing to do here? Because we are late. We should have done this by March last year.
Yeah.
We are going to an election. We have up to August 10th, 2026 to review boundaries if they are to be used in the election of 2027.
Yeah, and that is
what could we do?
That is the unfortunate thing as we speak today. Number one, we are out of time. Number two is even if we were to extend time, which either the courts or parliament can do, to what extent can we delimit these boundaries? And would we do it in a fair and just manner, bearing in mind that we'll have time constraints? So this is the quagmire we are in. We are trying to ask ourselves how best we can deal with it. Some constituencies deserve delimitation. Others don't. Number one. Number two, we are also worried about to what extent we can go. Remember, the threshold of constituencies is actually in the Constitution, that there shall be 290. So what we are telling IEBC to do is a realignment. It is not increasing. It is not decreasing. Apart from the protected ones, which, in my view, should actually now be unprotected. You remove the protection, they become substantive constituencies, and we move on because they are part of the 290. Wards, that is not catered for in the Constitution, and if there was time and the resources, we may have to look at them. But looking at wards is possibly even more onerous than looking at constituencies, because wards are much more than the constituencies. It's going to be on the table. As soon as the new commission comes into office, Justice and Legal Affairs will actually be working closely with them and trying to answer some of these questions with them. How far we can go, how far we can do any of these requirements.
But from your experience, what can they do with that order on Census 2019?
One, we may have to relook at globally look at the last census before 2019, which must have been 2009.
Yeah.
Look at that vis-a-vis the 2019. Also, we can look at the roll, the voters' roll. That also can give you an indication as to which areas you need to scrutinize closely so that you see whether you need to realign them or not realign them. So, and also statistics at the...
NBS.
Yeah, that again can be looked at. It's just not the census. I think we have enough material to look at so that at the end of the day, we know what to do. The only problem we have is we have sufficient time.
But being a political process, and there's already that dent on the data that involved everyone in 2019, in August 2019, how would you even use the data that's come thereafter to delimitate boundaries in such a scale?
Possibly the voters' roll and the statistics may be slightly more credible than that census, because that census had issues from the word go. But there is indicative material.
Right.
I don't think the figures have to be 100% correct. I mean, if Ruiru has a problem, it's known by everybody that it has 150,000 registered voters. My constituency, Tharaka, has 77 registered voters. So we know what we would work with, even if we don't have to go through census.
Your thoughts, Steve, on that, but also on the question of, so you can combine the question of reviewing the boundaries, but also the voters register that many Kenyans continue to raise questions, despite the audit that was done by KPMG very few days to the election. How credible is it?
Let me just first make a comment on the census. The High Court was mistaken in its reading of the law, and therefore the outcome of that application. It assumed that you can casually cancel the outcome of the national census in a particular region and then redirect, go and count them. There's so many factors into play. In fact, the result of this new count would be more flawed than the first one. I'm not anxious about it because I don't comment much about it because I like to take up the matter on appeal, but I believe the Court of Appeal will relook at that decision and balance law, policy, politics, and the socioeconomic needs of those people and come up with an outcome that does not create more problems than the one we already have on the table. But that is my small comment on that. Let me comment substantively on the delimitation of boundaries going forward. This is one area, Sam, where law and the interplay between law and politics will be fully highlighted. And I can tell you politics will have its day and will prevail as it should be. In this matter of delimitation of boundaries, regardless of what the Constitution says, politics will prevail. The Constitution is a document in flux. It's supposed to be read and understood as resolving pressing socioeconomic and political problems. We have 27 constituencies that were reserved for 10 years. The last delimitation was done on 4th March 2012. The Constitution says, following the first delimitation of boundaries, certain constituencies that does not meet the population quota will be preserved for a period of 10 years. 10 years have now elapsed. If they do not have the requisite population quota, they will be merged or subsumed into the neighboring constituencies. Now, I have a problem with that provision of the Constitution. And that's why I think our experts, I think working under pressure, missed very simple points. They turned delimitation of boundaries, they reduced it into a mathematical issue. Delimitation of boundaries cannot be reduced to mathematics. Simple numbers. 50 million divided by 290, bas. You have your numbers there. There are so many socio-political issues and cultural issues when it goes to delimitation. The most prominent one is identity. Identity. These 27 constituents are going to lose their identity because of numbers. Yet on the other hand, the Constitution says that we must make all voices count. Now, IEBC will tell you, we are implementing the Constitution, this is the law, effective 2027, you are no longer constituency, we collapse. But what are the unintended political consequences? If you tell Ugunja constituency, for instance, which is not among the protected constituencies, Ugunja constituency that was carved out of Ugenya, and tell them, you don't have the numbers, we're returning you back to Ugenya constituency, and they've produced a very prominent son in the name of Opiyo Wandayi, who became an expert in this government. And now you tell them, go into 2027 election without a representative from Ugunja constituency. Let me tell you, the voters, the politicians, and the political parties will not agree. I will quote what Honorable Mutula Kilonzo said in 2011 during the process of the enacting of the Elections Act. Right. Remember when we were struggling with the implementation of the two-third gender principle, Mutula Kilonzo at that time was the Minister for Constitutional Affairs, Justice and Constitutional Affairs. He was asked, how about we do balloting? You know, zoning, we reserve some constituencies as a single gender constituency. And he was asked, what if, I think he came from Boni, constituency. Yeah. What if Boni comes up? He said, no, I don't want Boni to come up. And as a politician, although a seasoned and prolific litigation lawyer, he said, as minister, we cannot go that way. This issue of zoning, single gender constituencies, Boni might come up. Then I won't be elected. And Boni people will be saying, look, we prefer to see Mutula Kilonzo back in parliament, but now you are telling us that we look at the bigger picture that requires 1/3, 2/3 representation, and Boni has come up. There will be broad political consensus, rightly so, that will kill that initiative. So I plead with the president. This area, Mheshimiwa, I agree with you. No, you've not said, but I would appeal to you and Honorable here that, please, let us build consensus on how to preserve these 27 constituencies even further for a period of another 10 years. And let us work.
So what will change in those 10 years?
We can debate what is to change in the 10 years, but right now, part of what could change is sensitization of the people, addressing the problem, the socioeconomic challenges these people have been facing, marginalization, the kind of need that made them be protected to begin with. We put a sunset clause, the sun is setting, but the problems are persisting. So do we just shut the door on these people, the right of representation, because of a mathematical formula? I plead with the political elite.
I don't know why you're reducing it to mathematical formula, because Article 89 of the Constitution, Article 5, says that but the number of inhabitants of a constituency may be greater or lesser than the population quota in the manner specified in Clause 6 to the account of geographical features and urban centers, community of interest, historical, economic and cultural ties, and means of communication.
No, Sam, don't worry about that. The primary reading of the Constitution, I'm well versed with it, says the primary consideration is you look at the population when you're generating the number, because equal vote, giving equal strength to equal vote. You look at the population of the country, you divide it by the 290 constituencies, then you use that as the starting point. You can make small adjustments, but largely the primary consideration is in the numbers. That's what I'm saying. We have reduced delimitation into a game of numbers, which is risky, reckless, dangerous.
All right.
Now, I plead for political consensus in that area. Unfortunately, and I must signal this early, Sam, because you and I will discuss this in the 2027 election. There is a very real chance that we may not be able to complete delimitation of boundaries ahead of this election. And it's about time, Sam, you start deepening that conversation so that we make peace with it and we take it out of the table for conversation. Because for legal, practical, and political reasons. Legal reasons is we don't have the commission. If you have the commission now, they have to do induction training, which can take, according to IEBC, 3 months. When they settle, remember, we're already in the last 2.5 years. Yet the election operation plan, do you have it? It's not there. We must have an election in 2027. Two competing interests. The election operation plan must be developed through a very rigorous process. process. Delimitation of boundaries requires commissioners to tour the 290 constituencies, the 47 counties, the 1,140 wards, doing public participation. They will be pressed for time. Even if they wanted, the commission won't be able to complete that work. Practically, that is a challenge. Politically, I've already documented the challenge. So I think, as we hope to get a new commission,
right,
the pressing question that we should be asking ourselves, is it tenable in law? Because if there's political fallout between Azimio and between ODM and Kenya Kwanza, they'll start amplifying the need to reconstitute, to do the boundaries review. Even if their approachment persists the ballot, you have this other wing of Azimio that is still very vigilant. They'll use it as a talking point.
Okay.
So we have to pay attention.
All right, I hear you. Mheshimiwa Mbui, knowing the practical challenges, is it still possible to do it, even if you don't conclude it for use in 2027 election, but at least do something?
Yeah, I think maybe now you've just nailed it, because it makes more sense that even if we start the process, we start it with a view of implementation beyond the next election, because this is a very, very short period of time. As other panelists here have said, the commission is not even in place yet. We are discussing even a commission that doesn't exist. We are yet to identify the right people into that commission, the right chair of that commission. They have to go through the induction training. They have to carry out by-elections, because there are by-elections of several constituencies and several wards that have to be done. And that when they are doing that, there'll be also building trust, I think, among the Kenyan citizens on their ability to carry out this responsibility. So it might be very difficult for them to manage to do that and then start handling the issue of boundaries. And then, like Wakili has said here, the issue of boundaries is a very, very sensitive matter, because the minute you touch boundaries, it means that you are affecting sitting and possible, potential members of parliament, and there'll be hue and cry all over the place. It probably means that some constituencies will have some wards hived out from them, attached to other neighboring constituencies, and a member of parliament might be coming from a ward that is probably going to be cut off and connected to another constituency. That means that you go into a new constituency, he has only one ward, and so his chances of being re-elected become less. So the people of that constituency will be I think mobilized to oppose these moves. Again, Sam, there's also the issue of political party strength in the House. Every political party wants to have more members. And if there are regions that are neighboring each other and there's a possibility that a constituency might be hived and end up presenting a member that comes from a region that would probably be, that would be opposing, I don't know how to explain it, but Kenyan politics is very regional. So if there's a constituency at a border point where one side normally votes Kenya Kwanza, the other side votes Azimio, just like even in the US there's the Democrats and the Republicans. So if there's going to be a hive in a constituency of that nature to favor the other side, then obviously there will be hue and cry. So I think the issue of borders might be a sensitive one, and best implemented just after the election, so that people acclimatize to the possibility that by the next election, these ward will be in this constituency, and they can start planning their elections and their campaigns towards that. Some remember the campaigns for 2027 started in August 2022. That is when the campaign started. So you can imagine the kind of the kind of damage it will cause to some people who've been on the campaign for 2.5 years.
You're not telling me that the boundaries delimitation should begin immediately after an election.
So that now
immediately after the last election there was no commission.
Yeah, I know.
Who tells you that in 2027 after August election there will be a commission?
No, they have security of tenure, so they have the period of time to serve.
Even Cherera 4 had security of tenure.
All right.
Also, let me say I'm very optimistic that the same mistakes will not occur in 2027.
Okay, Chairman Murugara, help us now. If you were to make the next election better than what you have had before, better than say 2022, what lessons do we take into it?
I think first and foremost, Sam, we must begin by preparations now. As soon as the commission comes into office, we go, as they get inducted, on one hand, the other hand, we are starting to prepare the cycle. Because time is short, there's a lot to be done, and especially if we do not do delimitation, we must now register voters. New voters must be registered because we don't want to disenfranchise young people who actually have reached the age of majority and cannot vote. So, to make sure that the next election is better than what we had in 2022, let's do a transparent registration. Let us also look at our systems. We know they had flaws. The electronic system had flaws. We try to fix those flaws, complementing it with also a very good manual system, because we said the two are complementary. We look at both as we were doing in the Supreme Court. And if we can also, let us have a bit of public participation and voter education so that we get it right from time to time. There are some laws that are supposed to be done, some amendments to the Election Act, the Political Parties Act, and other dead letter laws like the Campaign Financing Act, which is actually there, but it has no regulations because it is not a very popular piece of legislation. We need to look at it again and see.
Is there any effort in the House to bring to implement the regulations? The
regulations have not been brought. Remember, the ones that were brought in 2022 were annulled.
Yeah.
So we have to get a new set of regulations coming in, and it's only the Commission that can do that.
So the question again, is there commitment in the political class, those of you that sit in the House, to enact regulations when they come?
We can do so, but they have to be popular regulations. They must be acceptable to the people, to the members of parliament, and to everyone.
What does that entail?
What that means is sometimes when they come to us, we find them extremely complicated. Instead of easing the process of doing an election, they are making it more complicated. Like what we had in 2017, those guidelines which we actually withdrew, which were withdrawn.
Yeah.
I mean, they will make it so complicated for you to run an election because you have to have accounting offices, accounting officers. Money has to be banked, I don't know where. And, you know...
So wait, Parliament has to agree with the regulations?
Yes, yeah. Parliament has to approve. They are called statutory instruments. So number one, the public has to agree, but...
Does the same apply to regulations like share regulations?
Oh. Yes. All regulations have to be approved by...
Don't you find it suspect that all other regulations, Parliament agrees with them, but campaign financing?
Not all of them. We annul as much as we can.
Which ones?
Robert, we started delegated with you in the last term. This time I'm not in delegated anymore, so I may not quickly point out what they have annulled, but there was something on borders, which we actually annulled.
Yeah, the one.
Yeah. Remember also we annulled...
regulations on border.
Border, with the transport on NTSA last time. I think they were introducing heavy levies, which we thought were quite high. So we annulled those ones. And given time, I would give you a whole set of them that we don't approve everything that comes. Remember, regulations are initiated by regulation-making authorities. Ordinarily, they are ministries.
Right.
So when you
this case, it's IBC.
Yeah, this case is IBC.
Yeah.
We will look at them. We will do public participation, and we see whether they are feasible or not feasible. Then we can approve or not approve.
Okay.
I think the catch there, sorry for Mheshimiwa, and I think he has made a very big point, because they are statutory instruments, they are lawmaking, and the lawmaking is Parliament, so they have to supervise IBC.
Yep.
But I think the issue of IBC making regulation for campaign financing is a bit tricky, because it has conflict of interest issues. Members of Parliament are the ones who are doing it.
Yep.
It's going to affect them. So I think there's a balance, so that members of Parliament don't make it impossible to make any regulations for campaign financing. I think with consultations with stakeholders, not just Parliament, these rules can be made. And I wish that now that he's the chair of JLAC, he can commit to make that happen.
It's delegated legislation committee. Chaired by Honorable Chepkonga. It is not Justice and Legal Affairs.
You don't have a role?
No, at all. Mine are the main acts of Parliament relating to elections.
Maybe just a comment on that, Sam, very quickly.
Yes, Wakili.
2027 general election will not be the subject of campaign financing regulation for legal and political reasons. Political reasons because politicians don't want to be regulated. But that is now peripheral There are pressing legal challenges with the Election Campaign Financing Act 2013. I reviewed the bill and told Chair that there's a big problem with this act, and the regulations that flow from the act will be declared unconstitutional anyway if someone took it to court. It seeks to regulate campaign financing 60 days to election. Honorable Mbuya has just told you campaign for the 2027 election began just after the declaration of results in 2022.
Yeah.
So we need an approach that permits our politicians to spend freely but account for the sources of their financing, which means you account for the campaign donations and contribution. Where have you gotten the money from? But once you have it and once you've declared, you can spend freely. The problem now is that Article 88, Sub-Article 4 of the Constitution requires IBC to control contribution and expenditure. Nobody controls contribution and expenditure. You only control contribution. The US tried it. They abandoned that fight in 1978, Buckley versus Value. They said, we're not going to control expenditure. Canada, their attempts to control expenditure only controls third-party expenditure, campaign expenditure by civil societies. Politicians must be allowed to do their thing. IBC can't tell politicians that spend 10 million or 5 million on personnel. So if I want to hire a consultant, you want to hire me, I'm an expert in campaign financing. I'm writing my PhD thesis on Election Campaign Financing Act or laws, specifically. So Mheshimiwa, you can consult me. When I charge him 10 million, yes.
Then I can't campaign.
Then he can't campaign. So what is the rationale for regulation? The rationale for regulation is to reduce the corrosive effect of money in campaigns. How do you reduce corrosive effect? You have to rely on extra-constitutional measures, conversations that deepen our commitment to values, to a value system. Tell us, right now, Sam, I am not in public service. You don't need to know, and you have no right to know how much I'm worth. And you don't need to know where I'm raising my money for campaign from. But once I say I want to be in public office, then you have a right to know, because of the corrosive potential of my money in politics, Mr. Gola, you are running for MP. What is your budget? Your budget is 300 million? Okay, that's fine. We're not going to give you a silly 300 million. Just tell us how you have raised this money. Is it from own sources? But you've not been paying taxes. You file nil returns. How can you raise 300 million when you file nil returns? You get? Or you get from friends. Who are these friends? Are they opaque friends? Tell us the friends so we can follow the sources. Mheshimiwa here can't be contributing 20 million to my campaign, but he files nil returns. So that accountability is what is needed to reduce the corrosive potential. But once I have it, I will spend freely, and there's no limit on how much I can spend. So I think let's wait for 2032 until I can be able to...
You're postponing a lot of things, Wakili, this morning.
This is the reality.
I don't know what has happened, but it's time for us to close. I just want to take a look at some of the feedback that has come to us at Citizen TV Kenya. The hashtag is Citizen Daybreak. This is Bobo Tieno saying, we still have a long way to go for credibility quest to be achieved because we are already late in order to achieve, as per the Kriegler report, recommendations on reconstitution of IBC.
Correct.
Yes, true.
Lazaro Engineer is saying that time already running out for proper cleanup of the register. We can go to another election with the same register and expect to receive credible results. Samuel Oworth, you're saying the rain began beating the 2017 elections as of 16th of November 2016 when the IBC selection panel decided to conduct an opaque and unfair recruitment exercise. There is enough time for appointment of commissioners to restore credibility and trust. And Lillian, you're saying, Lillian Sioi, this should be your colleague, Mheshimiwa Mbuya. Wafula Chebukati will be remembered for his principled leadership, courage, and fidelity to the Constitution. A true patriot and a man of immense integrity, Chebukati professionally steered the IBC through 2 elections. And Wero Wero Megat, you're saying, I think the late Chebukati performed exceptionally well. In any elections, every loser will have one or two reasons to believe that the elections were not free and fair. Is there room for electronic voting in Kenya in future? Is a question you're asking. And I think well, finally, Kipchumba, you're saying Chebukati's tenure was marked by both praise and controversy. While some see him as a defender of democracy, others question his transparency. History will be the ultimate judge of his legacy. I wonder who will be writing that history. But President Kibaki said that historians shall write the history. Mheshimiwa Robert Mbui, Wakili Steve Ogola, Chairman Justice Legal Affairs Committee, Mheshimiwa George Murugara, and Canon Chris Kinyanjui, thank you for making time for us of this conversation. Still so many issues to be discussed. We will do so in our subsequent shows on what exactly to do to make sure we have a credible election. A more credible election. My name is Sam Gito. See you again some other time. Bye for now.